Claire lived in a small town where life was quiet and slow. She taught children at the local school, enjoying her days filled with books, chalk, and laughter. Her husband Ethan worked at a small repair shop, fixing cars, radios, and sometimes even old farm equipment. They had been married for 5 years, and to Claire, Ethan was just a kind, simple man who loved his coffee in the morning and a walk after dinner. Ethan did not talk much about his past. He had come to town a few years before they met, saying only that he had moved from far away and wanted a fresh start. Claire never pressed him for details. He seemed happy, and that was enough for her. Still, every now and then, little things caught her attention. Once, when a child ran into the street, Ethan moved faster than she thought possible, grabbing the child before a car could pass. Another time, while fixing a neighbor's radio, he mentioned something about frequency modulation in a way that sounded far too technical for a man who had never been to college. Claire smiled and teased him about being a secret scientist, but he only laughed and changed the subject. In the evenings, they would sit on their porch, watching the sun fade over the hills. Ethan would tell small stories about life in other places. Sometimes his words painted such vivid pictures that Claire felt she could see them, even though she knew he claimed to have never traveled much. She found his company calming, his presence steady and warm. One day, while walking through town, Claire noticed how people seemed to trust Ethan quickly. Strangers asked him for directions or help without hesitation. There was something about him, an air of quiet confidence. She told herself it was just his good nature, but deep inside, she wondered if there was more. Late one Friday night, a loud noise woke her. She went to the kitchen and found Ethan standing by the window, his eyes focused on the sky. The sound of thunder rolled in, but there was no lightning. She asked if he was worried about the storm. He shook his head and told her to go back to bed. The next morning, he acted as if nothing had happened. That Saturday, the town faced one of the strongest storms in years. Winds howled through the streets, and rain came down in heavy sheets. The power flickered and then went out. Claire heard shouting from down the road. The transformer near the school had failed, and several people were trying to figure out what to do. Ethan put on his coat and told Claire to stay inside. She followed anyway, worried about him in the storm. When they reached the transformer, she saw sparks and wires tangled in the rain. The men from the electric company had not yet arrived. Without hesitation, Ethan walked right up to it. Claire shouted for him to be careful, but he moved with calm precision. His hands worked over the machinery quickly, as if he had done it 1,000 times. She could barely follow his movements. In less than 2 minutes, the lights in the surrounding houses flickered back to life. People clapped and called out thanks, but Ethan simply nodded and walked away, avoiding any questions. Claire caught up with him, her mind full of questions of her own. She asked how he knew what to do. He smiled faintly and said it was just common sense. She did not believe him, but she let it go. Still, that night she lay awake, thinking about the way his hands had moved, the confidence in his eyes, and the way he seemed to know exactly how to fix something so complex. Life returned to normal in the days after, but Claire could not shake the feeling that there was something unusual about her husband. The thought stayed with her, waiting for the moment when she might finally understand who he really was. A few weeks after the storm, the town settled back into its quiet rhythm. The air was cooler now, and the leaves had begun to turn red and gold. Claire tried to push her questions about Ethan to the back of her mind, but they kept returning. Every time she saw him fixing something or helping someone, she wondered if there was a deeper truth hidden behind his calm smile. One evening, Claire and Ethan were walking home from the store when they heard a loud crash from a nearby alley. A delivery truck had backed into a streetlight pole, and the heavy metal frame leaned dangerously, wires hanging loose. A small crowd gathered, unsure what to do. Ethan stepped forward without hesitation. Claire called after him, but he ignored her and approached the pole. He examined it for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small tool she had never seen before. It looked far too advanced for something he might carry in his jeans. In less than a minute, he had the wires secured and the pole stabilized enough to keep it from falling. No one noticed the strange tool in his hand, but Claire did. The next day, Claire mentioned the tool over breakfast. Ethan shrugged and said it was something he had made from spare parts at the shop. She knew he was a clever repairman, but she could not shake the feeling that the device was unlike anything she had ever seen. Later that week, odd things began happening in town. a few unfamiliar vans parked near the outskirts. People in dark jackets walked through the streets, speaking quietly into small devices. Claire overheard one of them asking a shop owner if he knew of a man named Ethan. The shop owner shook his head and the man walked away without buying anything. Claire told Ethan about what she saw, expecting him to be surprised. Instead, he grew silent. He asked her to avoid those people and to come straight home after work. His tone was gentle, but serious, and Claire could see a flicker of concern in his eyes. One afternoon, while Claire was leaving school, she noticed two of the strangers standing near the gate. They seemed to be watching her. When she reached the corner, she turned and saw them speaking into their devices again. She hurried home, her heart beating fast. Ethan was waiting for her on the porch. Before she could tell him what happened, he said he already knew. He asked her to trust him and promised that everything would be fine. His calmness eased her a little, but the questions in her mind only grew. That night, Claire woke to a faint humming sound. She followed it to the basement, where she found Ethan working over something on his workbench. The object was covered with a cloth, but she could see a faint blue glow from underneath. When he noticed her, he quickly turned off the humming device and covered it more tightly. He told her it was just a project for a friend, and that she should go back upstairs. She wanted to press for answers, but the look in his eyes stopped her. The next day, the strangers became more visible around town. They spoke to the mayor, visited the power station, and even stopped by the repair shop. Claire watched from a distance as Ethan greeted them politely, but briefly. They left without incident, but she could see he was more alert than ever. One evening, as Claire walked home alone, she felt a shadow fall over her. One of the strangers had stepped into her path. He smiled, but there was something cold in his eyes. He asked if she knew Ethan and where he might be. Before she could answer, Ethan appeared from around the corner. His voice was firm as he told the man to leave her alone. The stranger backed away slowly, his gaze fixed on Ethan, and then walked off without a word. As they reached home, Claire could feel her fear mixing with curiosity. She wanted to demand the truth, but she could also sense that something bigger was unfolding. Whatever it was, Ethan was part of it, and she was standing closer to the edge of that mystery than ever before. The next few days felt heavy for Claire. She could feel something in the air, like a storm waiting to break. The strangers were everywhere now. They walked the streets in pairs, their dark jackets always zipped up, their eyes scanning faces. They stopped at the diner, the gas station, even the small park near the river. No one in town knew who they were, but their presence made everyone uneasy. Ethan became more guarded, locked the doors even during the day, something he had never done before. He started checking the windows at night, and Claire noticed he spent more time in the basement. When she asked him about it, he said he was fixing some equipment for the shop. But his voice carried a weight she had not heard before. One evening, Claire was leaving the school when she saw one of the strangers standing by a black van. He was holding a small device that looked like a phone, but with strange glowing symbols on the screen. He glanced up and met her eyes. She quickly looked away and walked faster, but she could feel his gaze following her. When she reached home, Ethan was waiting on the porch. He had that same serious look she had seen before. He asked if anyone had spoken to her, and she told him no, but she mentioned the man with the device. Ethan's jaw tightened. He said they would need to be careful from now on. The next morning, a loud knock shook their front door. Ethan opened it to find two of the strangers. They introduced themselves as investigators from a federal agency, though they never showed any identification. They said they were looking for someone dangerous who might be hiding in town. Their eyes studied Ethan closely as they spoke. Ethan listened quietly, his hands resting at his sides. He told them he did not know anything, and after a few moments they left. But Claire noticed they did not go far. The black van remained parked down the street. That night, Ethan stayed up late again. Claire woke and went to the kitchen for water, only to see a faint blue light flickering under the basement door. She stood there for a long moment, then decided to leave him to whatever he was doing. Deep down, she felt that pressing for answers before he was ready might only make things worse. The following afternoon, while Claire was at the market, she overheard two townspeople talking about the strangers. One said he saw them unloading strange equipment near the old water tower. Another claimed they had some kind of weapon hidden under a tarp. Claire's unease grew. She bought her groceries quickly and went home. That evening, Ethan came inside with a serious expression. He told Claire to pack a small bag with essentials. She asked why, but he only said that things were moving faster than he expected. Before she could question him again, the sound of engines echoed outside. Multiple vans were pulling into the street. Dark figures stepped out, moving with purpose. Ethan looked out the window, his body tense. He told Claire to go to the back of the house and stay low. She hesitated, but the urgency in his voice made her obey. From the back room, she could hear the knock on the door. It was loud and demanding this time. Ethan opened it, and muffled voices followed. She could not make out the words, but the tone was sharp. A moment later, heavy footsteps entered the house. Claire's heart pounded as she heard furniture shift and boots scrape against the floor. Someone called Ethan's name, but it did not sound friendly. Then, a sudden crash echoed through the house, followed by a thud. Claire wanted to run to him, but she forced herself to stay hidden. The noise grew louder. Voices shouted commands, and there was the sound of something metallic hitting the floor. Claire's fear turned to confusion when the shouting stopped all at once. There was silence, except for faint footsteps coming toward her. She held her breath until Ethan appeared in the doorway. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with an intensity she had never seen before. He told her they needed to leave immediately. Outside, the street was empty. The vans were gone, as if they had never been there. Claire wanted to ask what happened, but Ethan simply took her hand and started walking toward the edge of town. The night air was cold, and the sky above them felt darker than usual. Whatever had happened inside their house, she knew it was only the beginning of something much bigger. The air was still as Ethan led Claire through the narrow streets toward the outskirts of town. His steps were quick but silent. Claire kept looking back, half expecting to see the black vans return, but the road behind them stayed empty. She finally asked him what had happened inside their home. Ethan slowed for a moment, as if deciding whether to answer, then told her they no longer had time to hide the truth. They reached a quiet field, where the grass moved gently in the night breeze. Ethan stopped and turned to face her. His eyes caught the faint moonlight, and for the first time, she noticed they seemed to glow softly. He told her the strangers were not from any government agency. They were part of an alien faction that had been trying to infiltrate Earth for years. Claire stared at him, thinking she must have heard wrong. But Ethan continued, his voice steady, explaining that he was not born on Earth. He had come here years ago, disguised as a human, to watch over certain areas and protect them from outside threats. Claire's mind spun. She remembered every strange thing he had done, every moment that felt unusual. It all came rushing back, fitting together in ways she wished it did not. She asked why he never told her. Ethan said it was to keep her safe, and because he hoped the day would never come when she would need to know. Before she could speak again, a low humming sound filled the air. Bright lights appeared in the distance, moving quickly toward them. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He told Claire to stay close. As the lights grew brighter, she saw they were coming from small, sleek crafts that hovered above the ground. The crafts stopped at the edge of the field, and several figures stepped out. They wore dark armor, and their movements were sharp and precise. The leader of the group called out to Ethan in a language Claire had never heard before. The words were quick and sharp, carrying a weight she could feel even without understanding them. Ethan replied in the same strange language, his voice stronger than she had ever heard it. The figures spread out, moving to surround them. Without warning, one of them raised a weapon that pulsed with a strange light. The air shimmered as it charged. In an instant, Ethan stepped in front of Claire. A faint glow spread from his hands, forming a barrier of light that caught the blast and scattered it harmlessly into the night. Claire's eyes widened as she realized she was seeing his true abilities for the first time. The attackers moved in, but Ethan moved faster. His hands released bursts of energy that knocked the weapons from their grasp. He moved with a speed that made it hard for her to follow, each step precise, each motion deliberate. The field lit up with flashes of blue and silver as the fight continued. Finally, the remaining figures retreated toward their crafts. The leader shouted something at Ethan before stepping back into the nearest one. The crafts rose into the air and vanished into the night, leaving only the sound of the wind in the grass. Ethan turned to Claire. His face was calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. He said the attack proved the enemy had found him, and they would keep coming. He could not stay in town any longer, not without putting her in danger. Claire felt her chest tighten. She asked where he would go. Ethan said his allies were on their way, and they would help him take the fight away from Earth. They walked to a nearby hill, and Claire saw a faint light in the sky. It grew larger, until a sleek silver craft descended silently. A hatch opened, and two figures stepped out. They looked human at first glance, but their eyes glowed faintly like Ethan's. They greeted him with quiet words, glancing at Claire with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Ethan told Claire he had to leave with them, promised that his mission was almost over and that he would return once it was safe. Claire felt tears in her eyes, but she nodded. She knew there was no stopping him. As he stepped onto the craft, he turned one last time to look at her, his eyes meeting hers in the dim light. The craft lifted off, rising into the dark sky until it was nothing but a speck of light. Claire stood on the hill long after it was gone, the wind cold against her face. The world felt larger and stranger than it had ever been, and she knew her life would never be the same again. Days passed, and the town returned to its slow rhythm, but for Claire, nothing felt the same. Each morning she woke hoping to see Ethan walking through the door, yet the house stayed quiet. The memory of the silver craft rising into the night sky played over in her mind. She wondered where he was, what he was facing, and if he was safe. Life in town moved on. People spoke less about the strangers now, as if their sudden disappearance had been just another odd event that would fade into memory. Claire went to work, taught her classes, and kept up her routine, but deep down, she felt a constant pull toward the night sky. She found herself watching the stars longer than before, looking for any sign that might tell her Ethan was still out there. One evening, as she was locking the school gate, she noticed a small envelope tucked between the bars. There was no name on it, only a faint symbol she did not recognize. She opened it and found a short note written in Ethan's handwriting. It said he was safe, that the mission was going well, and that he thought of her every day. At the bottom was a drawing of a star, with 3 lines crossing it. She traced the mark with her fingers, wondering what it meant. Days turned into weeks. Claire kept the note hidden in a box under her bed. It became her quiet source of strength. She started to notice subtle changes in herself too. She was more aware of people around her, more cautious in crowds, and quicker to notice details others overlooked. She realized that living with Ethan had taught her more than she knew. Then, late one night, a low hum stirred her from sleep. She went to the window and saw a faint light moving across the sky, slow and steady. It was not like a plane, and it did not blink like a satellite. Her heart raced. She slipped on her coat and walked outside, following the light as it moved toward the hills beyond town. She reached the top of the same hill where Ethan had left weeks ago, and the wind brushed past her, carrying the faint scent of rain. The light in the sky grew brighter until it hovered just above the ground. A sleek craft touched down, its surface reflecting the moonlight. The hatch opened, and Ethan stepped out. He looked the same, yet there was a deeper strength in his eyes. Claire felt her chest tighten with relief. He smiled, and without a word, she ran to him. They stood together for a moment, neither speaking, as if both were afraid that words might break the moment. Ethan finally told her the enemy faction had been pushed back far enough that Earth was safe for now. He said his mission was not over, but he had been given time to return and make sure she was safe. Claire listened, her mind absorbing every word. She asked if they would come back. Ethan said they might one day, but they would be ready. They walked back toward town slowly. Claire asked about the star symbol in his note. Ethan explained it was a mark used by his people to signal trust and protection. When she asked if she could use it, he nodded and said it was hers now too. The days that followed felt brighter. Ethan did not share every detail about where he had been or what he had done, but Claire no longer needed every answer. She had seen enough to know the truth, and that was enough. She settled back into a quieter life. Though now she noticed how he always scanned the horizon and listened for sounds others would miss. On a warm evening, they sat on their porch watching the sunset. The town below seemed peaceful, but Claire knew the world was bigger and stranger than most people realized. She also knew that somewhere out in the dark, other watchers like Ethan stood ready to protect it. As the first stars began to appear, Ethan reached over and took her hand. They sat in silence, watching the night sky. Claire felt no fear now, only a steady calm. Whatever the future brought, she knew they would face it together, and that his strength, both human and beyond, would always be there beside her.